I'm mostly British,
I'm Chinese American.
also French, German.
I am Mexican, I am Spanish, I am American, and I am Venezuelan.
Half African American,
Teeny tiny trace amount of Nigerian.
half Puerto Rican.
So far as I know, I'm 100% Irish.
I can trace my ancestry back to bills of sale from slavery.
I'm a New Yorker and an American and the descendant of Eastern European.
Having a blended ancestry is a big part of what defines most of us as Americans. We all know that we're a mix of different cultures and people from other parts of the world. For many Black Americans, charting your ancestry back to a specific country has always been a mystery, and that's a testament to slavery.
The interest is uniform across the human species, but the ability to reconstruct was severely impeded by the transatlantic trade in enslaved Africans. Genetics helps to restore some of the lost information, but we know more about Neanderthals than we know about Africa.
Our fascination with the mixture of cultures and people that make up who we are as products of a country that's a melting pot is a part of why ancestry kits like 23andMe and Ancestry.com are so popular. And answering that question for African Americans of where did we come from revolutionized the way geneticists look at DNA to chart ancestry. And all of that started right here in New York City.
In 1991, construction workers at a federal building site in Tribeca stumbled across human remains from an African burial ground from the 16 and 1700s. Back then, New York was a British colony that relied heavily on chattel slavery. 42% of households owned enslaved people there, making it the largest slaveholding city in North America, second only to Charleston, South Carolina. Africans in New York at the time held on to their culture through burial ceremonies near a lake in what is now Lower Manhattan. When the plot was rediscovered, experts estimated that over 15,000 people were buried there, and almost half of them were children under the age of 12.
Rediscovering the burial ground stirred up a lot of emotions for New Yorkers. It forced them to take a critical look at how slavery played a role in creating the city they know and love today. For descendant communities, it meant that they had an opportunity to have a say in how slavery is memorialized here, and also play a role in the research that's conducted on the remains. Michael Blakey was enlisted as the scientific director to answer some of their questions. And one of their main questions was, where are these people from?
They had a culture all their own before they were brought and enslaved in New York. They wanted to know about those cultures.
The remains were sent to Howard University's Cobb Laboratory, where geneticist Dr. Fatima Jackson started trying to answer some of those questions.
Her team cut open skulls from 419 bodies that were exhumed from the site.
So are there specific parts of different bones that you go to harvest genetic material?
Oh yeah, for the genetic material, the best part is right here. This is the petrous bone. So this kind of triangular shaped bone.
Mm-hmm. How is the DNA right here different from, say, a femur?
It's just that it's more dense. The bone is more dense, so there's more DNA packed into this area. Mm-hmm. And my research group has developed a technique to extract this in about 4 cuts. They mark it, they cut it, and then they pop it out.
Once harvested, DNA from the petrous bone was extracted and compared to a database of samples from humans all around the world, using the exact same process commercial ancestry kits use today to pull DNA from saliva samples. But the results were off.
There were a number of inconsistencies. It seems unlikely that a European would slightly file his teeth, or Native Americans would wear waist beads, be buried with a pipe that is Nigerian. So what we're finding is that, it is certainly possible for the DNA to be wrong.
Up until this point, genetic research primarily focused on trying to figure out mixtures between geographically disparate areas as a proxy for race. So how African are you, or how European are you, or how Asian are you, and how does that show up in your DNA? The problem is, biologically speaking, race doesn't actually exist.
We're just one race. Sapiens is our race. We're all Homo sapiens sapiens. That second sapiens is actually our racial designation from a biological point of view. All diversity that exists among modern humans exists below the racial level. We've had these notions that are more a product of our political and economic priorities than scientific realities.
No one had ever asked the question that the descendant African American community asked us to ask of our data, which was, what were the origins of essentially African America? So geneticists had never asked that question, and the databases were not set up to answer it.
Shifting the question from how African are you to where in Africa are you from meant that they needed to go back to Africa and collect a more diverse pool of samples.
Dr. Jackson and her team went to Cameroon and set up the very first DNA bank in Africa in order to help bolster their databases.
We would try to tie the genes that we were finding to the ecological setting, and that gave us a roadmap for reconstructing where people in the diaspora had come from.
The burial ground played a huge role in teaching geneticists about both biases in their field and gaps in their catalog of DNA reference points. And in the case of commercial ancestry kits, the picture is still very much so incomplete, especially for descendants of people who were enslaved in America.
So is this the basis of commercial DNA ancestry kits?
The commercial companies do not have continental African database that is needed to make the kind of connections that we have for North Atlantic European ancestry. We're at the beginning stages of understanding the human genome, not at the end stages.
The African burial ground was memorialized in 2007 by the National Park Service, and the monument itself bears the markings of some of the different countries and cultures that have blended together to make our unique ancestry as Black Americans. DNA might not be able to answer all of our questions about where we came from, but it does offer an opportunity to gather more information and reclaim that narrative.
What do you think that means or tells us about what it means to be Black in America?
The commercial tests are beginning to unite Americans in ways that they did not expect. You know, people from ostensibly different ethnic populations who are your relatives because the genes don't really discriminate in that way. They don't care about the color of your hair or the skin color or anything like that. We know that the interpretation of the data has been lacking because of the reference databases being limited. But what genetics forced us as a people, not just African Americans, but all Americans, to confront our own history, and in doing so, we understand ourselves better and the choices that our ancestors may have made that allowed us to exist today.